Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the channel. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I hope your day and your week have been going very well so far. Got a new day, which of course means a new NBA player prop video to share with you guys. But first, as always, people, please make sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and drop a comment down below. It helps the channel grow, and it really does mean a ton to us. With a new day comes some new opportunities to go ahead and make some money. I have 5 NBA player props to go ahead and share with you guys in today's NBA slate. But first, guys, before we dive into today's picks, a quick little recap of how we did last night. And overall, guys, a very solid performance, a 3-1 night. We were very close to going 4-0. Trey Murphy, unfortunately, did not come through for us on his player prop over 29.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. But a really solid night. We did put a little extra units there on the Brook Lopez play too, which ended up being a very nice cash for us. So we are now 156 and 129 on the year. So we're having a really strong year. You put together single bets and parlays, we are up over 22 units profit this season on our player props. So we're having a pretty solid year. Let's see if we can't keep the good times rolling. Like I said, guys, 5 player props coming your way. Let's go ahead and make some more money today. Jumping right into the outlier screen, guys, our first player prop in today's NBA slate comes from the Hornets-Hawks game, 7:30 p.m. tip-off. We're going Miles Bridges of the Charlotte Hornets over 23.5 points. We're getting this one for -120 over on BetMGM. It is, of course, available on multiple sports books for varying odds. And we'll be honest, the data, not the greatest from an overall standpoint or even really a recent standpoint for Miles Bridges. This 23.5 point line is an elevated line due to the matchup and due to some other circumstances, like the fact that he's cashed this over in 4 of his last 5 games. That is an 80% hit rate over his last 5 games. He's averaging a whopping 33 points per game over his last 5. Now, to be fair, he has one game there versus Cleveland where he had 46 points. But overall, you see of late, he's been really having a good run here for the Hornets, and it makes sense. Charlotte, a lot of injuries right now. It's basically the LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges show. And honestly, Miles Bridges has been a little more consistent as a contributor than LaMelo Ball has been. Now, like I said, the overall numbers are not great. Just a 36% hit rate this year for Miles Bridges, averaging 21.18 points per game this year. Again, the line normally wouldn't be at 23.5. It'd probably be closer to 21.5 or 20.5 points. It's 23.5 because of the matchup. Now, from a head-to-head standpoint, a 50% hit rate against the Atlanta Hawks over their last 4 meetings. The last time they played this year, the only time they played this year back on October 25th, he had 27 points in that game. He is averaging 22.25 points per game across the last 4 meetings with Atlanta. And looking at Charlotte back on October 25th versus now, the fact that he cashed that over back then, I think spells well for us this time, because back then you had LaMelo, you had Brandon Miller, you had your full team. Now you have a little bit of a weaker Hornets team where kind of Miles Bridges, he's the number 2 scoring option, but you know, there isn't, after him, there's a pretty significant drop-off in terms of scoring options for the Hornets. So I think this is a pretty good spot. Even the last 20 games, honestly, a 55% hit rate over the last 20, averaging 24.4 points per game. So it's not the I know the overall data is not fantastic, but it's not a terrible player prop from a data standpoint. Now, the one key thing here, obviously, is the matchup with Atlanta. Like we already said, a 50% head-to-head hit rate. Overall, Atlanta this year, 27th in points allowed in general to opposing teams, giving up almost 120 points per game to opposing teams. So you've got a bottom 5 defense in the NBA, and if you go ahead and narrow it down to the power forward position, 24th in points allowed, giving up 24 points per game this year. And even versus small forwards, Miles Bridges plays between the 3 and the 4 spot for the Hornets here. They are 29th in points allowed versus small forwards, giving up 23.6 points per game. So whatever way you want to shake it, versus small forwards versus power forwards, Miles Bridges, of course, plays between both positions. Either way, a really good defensive matchup here for Miles Bridges against the Atlanta Hawks. And one last data point before we move on, guys, the insights provided by Outlier. Shout out to Outlier, by the way. Every data point, everything that you're seeing in this video and will see in today's video is brought to you by Outlier. They're the sponsor of today's video and all of my NBA player prop videos here on the channel. And the best part is all the information you're seeing here on this screen is available to you. We have a special link down below in the description that gives you guys a 7-day free trial to check it out for yourself. There's so much stuff, guys. I'm only giving you guys the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Outlier. So make sure to check out that link down below. 7-day free trial. You get access to all of this data and more thanks to Outlier. But we have the insights provided by Outlier. Miles Bridges has exceeded 23.5 points in 4 of his last 5 games versus bottom 10 defenses for points allowed, like the Atlanta Hawks, who are bottom 5. He's averaging 25.4 points per game in his last 5 games versus bottom 10 scoring defenses. So really good numbers across the board here, minus the overall data, I guess you could say, for Miles Bridges. But I think it's a really solid matchup and a really solid player prop to kick off today's video. All right, guys, our second player prop in today's slate. Another player prop where the data isn't exactly fantastic, but the matchup and the situation is really solid. We have the Jazz-Grizzlies game, 8 p.m. tip-off. We've got Ja Morant of the Memphis Grizzlies over 33.5 points plus assists. Now, we are getting this one for minus 110 over on DraftKings, but don't worry, guys. It's available on multiple sports books for varying odds. As always, guys, make sure to go ahead and shop around for the best sportsbook odds available to you. It makes a huge difference when it comes to the profit in your sports betting. All right, so Ja Morant over 33.5 points plus assists. Like I said, the data, not very great. You see just 4 of his last 10 games, he's cashed the over. Overall this year, just a 27% hit rate on this over, averaging 29.12 points plus assists per game this year. Now, again, like the previous player prop with Miles Bridges, this is an elevated line. This line would normally not be this high for Ja Morant. A couple reasons here. First and foremost, it is the recent run of Ja Morant. He has cashed the over in 3 straight games. So although the overall numbers are not fantastic for Ja Morant, of late, he's been on a really good run. 3 straight games, he's cashed this over with some really solid performances. Now, the head-to-head data is not fantastic. He's failed to cash the over in each of his last 2 games against the Utah Jazz. They played twice this year, and both times he's failed to cash the over. The first time he was relatively close, only 2 points / assists off. The next time, he wasn't even close, back on January 25th. But the defensive matchup is very solid. You see overall this year, the Utah Jazz bottom 3 in the NBA in both points allowed and assists allowed in general to opposing teams. If you go ahead and narrow that down to the point guard position, 29th in points, 28th in assists. So bottom 3 in both categories overall and versus point guard. So it's a very solid matchup. We've seen point guards have a lot of success when they face off with the Utah Jazz. So yes, Ja's head-to-head numbers against Utah, not great. It is a small sample size, to be fair. But the other big reason why I like this player prop beyond the matchup is the fact that you do have some key injuries for Memphis here. Santi Aldama out again. The big one, though, is that Jaren Jackson Jr. is also out again with that ankle sprain. Now, again, talking about small sample size, we have a small sample size for games played for Ja without Santi and without Jaren Jackson Jr. However, in those games this year, which, sorry about that, there have only been a few. In 3 games this year, 2 out of 3 he's cashed the over, but he's averaging 36.33 points plus assists per game when those 2 do not play, and he scored at least 30 points plus assists in all 3 games. So I think it's safe to assume with those guys out, Ja Morant is going to be called upon to do a little bit more, and it makes sense. Look at the numbers here. He's averaging almost 19 shot attempts per game without those guys, 17 potential assists per game. He's playing almost 34 minutes per game, taking more threes, more free throws. So everything increases because he has to. He's got no choice. He has to step up with those guys being out. So with that parlayed with the fact that, Utah does not do a very good job at defending point guards, I think we've got a pretty good matchup on our hands here for Ja Morant. Risky from a data standpoint, I understand, but from minus 110 odds, Ja Morant is one of the premier players in the NBA. I feel pretty comfortable putting my bet in his hands, so taking him as the second player prop in today's video. By the way, guys, we're about to hit the 9-minute mark in today's video, so if you are still watching at this point, please go ahead and comment 9 down below. As always, guys, we appreciate those who watch all the way through each and every single one of our videos here at Guy Boston Sports. So comment 9 down below if you're still watching. All right, guys, our third player prop in today's slate. We actually have 2 player props coming from this very game. We have Suns-Rockets, 8 p.m. tip-off. Maybe a little foreshadowing, maybe a future team that Kevin Durant could be playing for here in Houston. Who knows? But we got Suns-Rockets, 8 p.m. tip-off. Kevin Durant over 25.5 points against the Houston Rockets. Again, Kevin Durant, some rumors floating around. I think it's very clear he's going to be leaving the Suns after this year. Houston could be a potential Kevin Durant landing spot. Just saying. But Kevin Durant over 25.5 points. We're getting this one for minus 110 over on BetMGM. But like I said, guys, available on multiple sports books for varying odds. But minus 110 on BetMGM is the best odds available to me. And unlike the last 2 player props where the data was kind of dicey, the data on this one is absolutely fantastic for Kevin Durant. He's been on a crazy run with the Suns. He's cashed this in 7 of his last 10 games, including 4 of his last 5, averaging 29 points per game over his last 5 games. Let me show you guys the volume that he's playing with right now, the usage numbers. I mean, 20 field goal attempts per game over his last 5 games, playing almost 41 minutes per game. Really crazy numbers here of late for KD. He's quite literally putting the Suns on his back, and he kind of has to do that if the Suns have any chance of making the play-in at this point. And it's not just of late. If you stretch the data out to the overall numbers for KD, the numbers are still pretty solid. 58% hit rate this year, 30 out of 52 games he's cashed the over, averaging 26.94 points per game this year. So yes, even though he's been on a really, really great run of late, even the overall numbers are pretty solid here for KD. And if all that data didn't convince you guys, the head-to-head numbers also pretty solid. He's cashed the over in 4 of his last 5 meetings with the Houston Rockets, averaging 29.2 points per game across those 5 meetings with Houston. The one time he missed it back last year on February 29th, he just missed it with 24 points in that game. So 2 points off from having a 100% green bean against Houston. Now, he's only played Houston once this year back on February 12th, but he had a massive performance, 37 points in that game against the Rockets. Took 22 shots, shot 15 for 22, 68% from the floor, had an incredible game against them. However, we don't really need that. We need 26 points, so you can literally chop 10 points off of that number. We still have a cash on the over. So feeling pretty good about this one. The only downside is, unlike the other player props, the defensive matchup on paper isn't great versus forwards this year. Houston 9th in points allowed versus power forwards, 2nd in points allowed versus small forwards. So whatever way you spin it, not the best defensive matchup. Houston usually pretty good at defending the forward spots. However, again, about a month ago they played, literally a month ago actually they played, and Kevin Durant had 37 points. So I'm not too concerned about that part. So I like this as the 3rd player prop in today's slate. All right, guys, our 4th player prop in today's slate, going back to another player prop where the data isn't great, but the matchup is really good. Staying with the Suns-Rockets game, we're going Şengün, Alperen Şengün of the Rockets over 10.5 rebounds. Now, it says minus 160 on DraftKings, but you can find this in BetMGM for minus 125 odds if BetMGM is available to you guys in your state. If not, only minus 160 on DraftKings. It's a little too high on the odds standpoint, but I mean, it is a pretty good player prop if you wanted to put a little extra on there. I wouldn't hate it. But obviously, minus 125 on BetMGM is the better play. Last 10 games, not bad. 6 of his last 10 games, he's cashed the over. He's averaging 10.4 rebounds per game over his last 10 games. However, go ahead and stretch the data out to the entire season view. Not great. 43% hit rate this year for Şengün. He is averaging 10.41 rebounds per game this year. So he's averaging right around that line we need him to be at. But overall this year, 43% hit rate for Şengün. Not fantastic. And from a head-to-head standpoint here, 2 of his last 5 meetings with the Suns, he's cashed the over. He's averaging just 8.6 rebounds per game against Phoenix over their last 5. Now, they played only one time this year, like we mentioned, back on February 12th. He did cash the over with 13 rebounds in that game against the Suns about a month ago, and he had 20 rebound chances in that game, so plenty of opportunities for rebounds. He's averaging about 16.4 rebound chances per game against the Suns, and you have seen a couple of these games where he's had some big numbers, 29 rebound chances, 20, 17. So although the head-to-head data isn't great, the opportunities have certainly been there for Şengün to grab some boards when playing the Suns. And one of the key reasons why I love this player prop, guys, is that Phoenix is one of the worst rebounding teams versus centers in the NBA. Bottom 5 in the league, 26th, giving up 13.4 rebounds per game against centers. Now, I should mention, over the last 7 games or so, they've gotten a little bit better, but this is still not a good rebounding team. Nick Richards, Mason Plumlee, those are your options at center right now for the Suns. I don't trust that very much. Şengün, an all-star caliber, all-star big in the NBA. So, I think Şengün should be able to get 11 rebounds in this matchup here. Şengün should dominate versus the Suns primarily. However, I didn't take points plus rebounds because from a scoring perspective, he just doesn't take enough shots or score enough points on a consistent basis for me to go ahead and ride with him with the points plus rebounds. I think the rebounds are the safer play in this one. So Şengün over 10.5 rebounds. It's our 4th player prop in today's video. All right, guys, our 5th and final pick in today's video. We're moving on to the Timberwolves-Nuggets game. 10 p.m. tip-off. We're going Anthony Edwards of the Minnesota Timberwolves over 26.5 points. We're getting this one for minus 105 over on DraftKings. It is available on multiple sports books for varying odds. Kind of the theme of today's video, a lot of these player props, the overall data not great, but the matchup or the head-to-head or maybe the recent data is not too bad. In this case, the recent data, not great. 4 of his last 10, he's cashed the over. Again, this is an elevated line. Normally, I don't think Anthony Edwards, not too elevated. It's probably usually around 23, 24 and a half for Ant. 26.5 in this game. He's cashed in 4 of his last 10. If you do stretch the data out to the last 20, it is slightly better. 55% hit rate, averaging 29.15 points per game over his last 20 games. But when you go ahead and stretch the data out to the last whole season, the last 63 games for Anthony Edwards, a 49% hit rate, not terrible, just shy of 50%, 31 out of 63 games this year. He's cashed the over, averaging 27.19 points per game this year. So really, it's not terrible, but obviously we would prefer some better numbers there from Anthony Edwards from a cash standpoint. But again, a slightly elevated line in this matchup. Now, speaking of the matchup, the head-to-head data, pretty damn solid. A pretty good sample size as well. He's played the Denver Nuggets 13 times, including playoffs since last year. 7 of 13, he's cashed the over, averaging 27.77 points per game across the last 13 matchups with Denver. That is a 54% hit rate. Now, if we narrow it down to this season only, he's played them 2 times. He's cashed the over in both times. Back on November 1st, he had 29 points, and their most recent meeting back on January 25th, he had 34 points. So some pretty good success versus Denver this year. But again, from the overall numbers perspective, pretty solid. Even looking at some of these misses, 24 points, 25. So very close. Even when he misses, he genuinely stays around the number. The playoff series, he had a couple of lower games. He kind of fell apart in the playoffs versus Denver. Minus, of course, the game where he had 44 points. Or even the game where he had 40. That was a really good series between them. He had a couple really big games, but you could definitely tell he kind of ran out of gas in that series. Now, as good as Denver is this year, defensively, they are kind of a mess. 24th overall in points allowed this year to opposing teams. If we narrow it down to shooting guards, they are 25th, so bottom 6 in the NBA in points allowed, giving up almost 30 points per game to opposing shooting guards. So good head-to-head data, pretty solid defensive matchup. Yes, the recent data and the overall data, it could be better. But I don't hate the spot here for Anthony Edwards. I think it's a pretty good matchup here. And again, when you're playing Denver, these kind of games, you got to imagine he kind of gets more amped up for these kind of matchups. These two teams that met in the playoffs a year ago. You got to imagine these two teams definitely kind of take it to another level. So I think Anthony Edwards over 26.5 points is a really solid player prop in today's slate. All right, guys, those are all 5 picks in today's slate, and that is it for me today. Thank you very much, as always, for watching. One more time, guys, please make sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and drop a comment down below. I'll be back tomorrow with another NBA player prop video, but until then, hope you're all winners. Enjoy your Wednesday. Let's go ahead and make some money.